Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here and talking to you. I'll get into this because there's a fair bit to cover and I don't want to sort of just try and get through it as quickly as we can so that you get an overview because there's probably too much. But okay, so the first issue we have is that there are a lot of older chemicals out there and there's nothing in the pipeline. And I mean nothing in the pipeline. So most of the chemicals we have out there, which started with thibenzole in about 1961. And we followed on there with things like oxybenzole, oxfendazole and fenbendazole. And then later, so they're collectively called the BZs, and the markets at that time were sheep and horse. Since then, we've had the pyrimidines, which is levamisole, pyrantel, and also morantel. And then following that, we've had the macrocyclic lactones, which are very widely used, and that includes abamectin, ivermectin, and moxidectin. Thanks to Ray Kaplan, who we've met on a number of occasions. One group that does tend to get left out is the heterocyclics, which is piperazine. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is an even older one. That's probably been around since the 1950s. So there's a reason that most of the products are dual actives. Sometimes we get up to 4 actives, although this can be problematic, and a good example would be Q-Drench, which currently has some fairly big resistance issues. When we look at the, and this is adapted from Martin Nielsen's work in 2019, we see that we have 3 classes, but there's actually 4, including heterocyclics, which, as I mentioned before, generally get overlooked. We have widespread resistance to the small strongyles, which is the cyastamines. Large strongyles, clearly there's not too many issues there. And then over here we have ascarids. And then the final column are pinworms. So as you can see with the ascarids, there's early indications as far as BZs are concerned, the pyrimidines, and also this widespread to the macrocyclic lactones. In other words, when it comes to treating foals with ivermectin, abamectin, or moxidectin, you're not going to touch these ascarids at all. As far as pinworms are concerned, there's nothing, there's no resistance known about the BZs or the pyrimidines, but there's early indications. So this is one of the reasons why we have generally 2 actives in any one product, and we're talking about worldwide resistance, not just Australia. We use a FECPAC unit, a FECPAC G2, and I just want to sort of run through some results. I like to be sort of nuts and bolts here about this. This is one of my foals, Barinka. As you see from these 4 foals that we're talking about, they've got very low counts of strongyles. She's got the highest one, but these horses with 90 eggs per gram, 45 eggs per gram, even the 225, the strongyles, is not a problem for these foals. And these foals should not be wormed, okay? The only one, excuse me, that should be wormed is Barinka's foal here, where it has 90 ascarids, and that is a problem. That is a real problem. We always need to treat ascarids. In fact, we always say anything above 1 it needs to be treated. From these FECPAC things, we've picked up some very interesting things like you're seeing here, and you'll see in the coming slides. One of them was a bit of a surprise to us. We had 1 case of coccidiosis. This is a scouring foal and a scouring mare that was scratching everyone's head, but once we started to treat it with a coccidiostat, that changed the whole matter. With this particular foal, what we did was we treated, so she was tested on the 12th of May, and we treated her on the 12th of May, and we did a follow-up fecal egg count. And as you can see, this product worked out to be very effective. So this is a combination of oxfendazole and piperazine. When you talk to most studs, they'll tell you, oh, those BZs are not much good. Well, I can tell you that in a rotation, this is a very, very good wormer. And we need to rotate our wormers to get the results. I'll now show you a result using ivermectin and praziquantel. Now, most of you will be using some form of mectin with praziquantel. The thing to remember here is that praziquantel only does tapeworm. So you're only going to really need to use this type of wormer in spring perhaps, or definitely in spring, and then maybe a second time in autumn. But the results here are a disaster, and without fecal egg counts, you can't see these results. So each one of these foals at 675 through to 1935 eggs per gram needs to be treated very quickly. Of equal concern is the amount of ascarids that we've got here at 90, 810 and 450. Now, the reason we have a concern with ascarids is not only are they a problem, but they also lead to liver and lung scarring. So they're a real problem. This one here, if you asked us about these results, we would not be, the only one we would treat would be the two with ascarids at 90 eggs per gram. And if the foal 3 didn't have any ascarids at all, then we'd only be treating the second foal and none of the others, because we want these foals to build immunity. And we want strategic use of our wormers because, one, they're old, two, there's a lot of resistance as far as they're concerned. But we need to do these fecal egg counts so we actually know what's going on. So we've designed a bit of a program where we use different wormers on a seasonal basis. And I'll show you an example of one of the stud programs in a minute. But the whole idea here is that we're looking to use one fecal egg count per season. We assume 2 wormings, but again, let's be strategic about this and let's only worm the ones that need worming. Do not worm everything. And one of the problems I find with a lot of studs is you start asking them about these things and they want to worm every foal. Well, we don't want to worm every foal. We want those foals to build their own immunity. So if they've got a count of, say, 0 to 300 eggs per gram, don't worm them. If they've got 300 to 500, treat them with a suitable wormer and then do a further fecal egg count next season, or even do a check in 4 to 6 weeks' time. If they've got high counts, again, we need to treat with a suitable chemical wormer. If they've got 1 ascarid, ascarids are a major problem in foals and we're seeing more and more of them all the time. And ascarids cause inflammation and scarring of the liver and lung tissue. So it's going to be very hard to get a good racehorse if the animal can't breathe. This is a stud that came up with a program, and while this is probably not an absolutely ideal program in my eye, at least it's a program. So they've got a plan, they do fecal egg counts, they're doing fecal egg count reduction tests, and they're looking at the re-emergent period. So if you look back, think back on the foal that we had earlier, we'll try and do a fecal egg count about 2 weeks after we've treated that foal that had the ascarids to see whether or not that worming has worked. And if it's worked, that's fine. Let's go a month and we'll check that foal again. And we'll keep an eye on the foals that need to be treated. The older the animal gets, by the time it's 2 years of age, it's built its immunity. There are some cases where you'll get horses that are high shedders, but generally speaking, that will be the case will be that they'll look after themselves. Okay, so the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But the problem we've got here is not enough studs are doing fecal egg counts in the first place. So here's a few things I've listed here about 7 items that you can look at doing, which most studs tell me we're too busy, staff cost money, all these excuses, but it's time to make a monumental change in the way we think and the way we do these things. So you need to look at removing manure. You need to look at spelling paddocks. you need to look at cross-grazing with other species. Quarantining animals when they come onto the farm. Do not rely on any one class of compounds or continue to use that. I mean, we've seen studs in the hunter and elsewhere that have used the same wormer for 4 or 5 years. Do not rely on paddocks to be the weanling paddock or the yearling paddock or the broodmare paddock. Rotate. I mean, mares, yes, they produce a lot more manure than a foal, but they also carry a lot less worms. So if you were to run mares in a paddock, for example, I'm assuming the paddocks are suitable for weanlings or yearlings, then you could run them in the paddocks for a period and then run your weanlings or your foals after them, and that would help you reduce their exposure to worms because they're not going to pick it up in pasture. Really, this is a subject on its own, but we developed a product called Biowormer. It was 20 years in development. We started out with CSIRO back in December 1997. In 2018, we had the product registered in Australia, New Zealand, and the US, and we're still doing the work to get registration in Europe. It's a biological control product. It's the first of its kind anywhere in the world. It's a non-chemical, okay, because you're using a fungus that's derived from pasture, and that consumes infective larvae, including chemically multi-resistant larvae, within the manure of the grazing animal. So this is another tool that we can use that we haven't had before. We've had good acceptance. We're still growing the market. We're still educating the market, and we're still trying to get more and more studs and others to listen to us about doing fecal egg counts. Now, fecal egg counts are not the be-all and end-all, but they are certainly a guide. And if we were doing more of these and encouraging your vets or your trusted advisor, then this is what it's all about, is strategically worming young horses, particularly when they need to. I always like to have a take-home message, and I hope I don't offend anyone, certainly not my intention, but you can all go and get fecked. Fecal egg count testing is the way to